This is Between the Brackets, a MediaWiki podcast, episode 10, June 12th, 2018. Welcome to Between the Brackets. I'm Yaron Koren, and my guest for this episode is Ben Fletcher, who is a systems architect at the Information Systems and Services Group in the United Kingdom Ministry of Defence in Corsham, which is located in the southwest of England. And what better time to talk to Ben than now, when the military alliance between the US and the UK has been strengthened thanks to a royal wedding. Ben helped to select MediaWiki for use at the Ministry of Defense in 2016 and has been involved with developing and maintaining MediaWiki since then. Before we get started, Ben would like to clarify that all opinions expressed here are his own and do not necessarily represent those of his employer. So Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
I think so far you're what in the US military they call a lifer. How long have you been in the British military?
I'm actually coming up to my 16-year point, and I leave in November. So the sentence will be ending soon.
Very good. And we'll talk more about your plans for the future and so forth later. But just to get started, what is your IT background?
So actually, it's not a traditional background. I joined as a engineer, a Royal Air Force engineer, and as an engineering officer, you need to have an engineering background. And my background was actually in mechanical engineering. When I went through engineering training, most of the jobs were about the maintenance of aircraft. However, I saw where the sort of future was heading, and I chose to go down the CE route, so it's the communications electronics engineer route. So I had to really start from scratch again and really start to understand IT systems and how they worked. I always likened it and just said it's just glorified hydraulics, and I still maintain that. So understanding the networks and all the same, but it's been a fantastic experience. I've really enjoyed really learning IT, and every day you learn something new, and you always meet people who know more than you about IT. That's always the way. But if you love learning and you love sort of understanding things, then IT is the way to go.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And as far as your military service, what kinds of places have you been deployed?
Yeah, so I've been to a few places. I've been to Bosnia, I've been to Afghanistan. I've done exercises, I've done fun things like going at Grand Canyon, New Zealand. So I've been all around the world and had some amazing experiences. And as an engineering officer, you move every 2 to 3 years, so you're really thrown into the deep end and faced with new challenges and new systems that you may have never touched before, or so it's a really quick learning. You quickly got to get up to speed, understand what's going on, how the system works, and just get a grip of things very, very quickly, which again is a really enjoyable challenge.
I feel like we could do an episode just about your experiences overseas. But actually, what you said ties into something I wanted to ask, which is how you think doing IT for the military has affected what you look for in software, as compared to if you were doing something similar in just a standard corporate environment.
That's an interesting question. So in terms of how you'd go about selecting software based on my experiences.
Well, and just in terms of are there different sort of features or strengths that you look for?
The single thing I harp on about is, in the future, I don't think it's going to be about purchasing this software and doing it really well. I think it's going to be about amalgamating open technologies and putting them together. We can build. I was very fortunate that the military sent me off to do a master's in computer network security, And my dissertation was building a home automation system using a wireless router. Now that was using Raspberry Pis, that was using a wireless router. So I had to, had to get to the background of the Unix system behind the router. I had to learn the Raspberry Pi and the Python programming, and also then the Arduino boards to link it all up. But these are all open source technologies, all run by fantastic communities. And you could go to all these resources on the internet and actually link all those things together. And I really think in the future, the companies that are going to succeed are going to grab these open technologies, build them together, and actually then produce these things, but be able to adapt to different scenarios. And so to me, that avoidance of what we call vendor lock-in, I think is going to become even more important.
Yeah. That actually ties well into the next thing I want to talk about, which is MediaWiki specifically. Speaking of embracing open source and avoiding vendor lock-in. So how did you get started selecting and using MediaWiki?
Yeah, so it's excuse me, it's so as I joined the team, there were a number of things going on, and I work in design and architecture as you talk about, and the way it works is that the operational community come along and they state a requirement, they state what they want to achieve, and what we do is we look at what capability already exists that could achieve that, or if we need to actually then develop something new. Either way, what used to happen was we had this thing called the defense network, and your capability would join that defense network, and there was a policy that made sure that you behaved in accordance, that you weren't going to knock everybody else off that network by just by basically denial of service because you're so bandwidth hungry and so on. And this became the policy known as the JSP 604, the Joint Service Publications 604, and had the network joining rules. When I came along, we were no longer this. There's no longer this defense network. As most industry, most companies, we're buying services. So what we're doing is linking together those services. And as the architecture team, what we had to do is make sure those services could join up and again, behave accordingly. And the problem is that the 604 hadn't evolved. It was really difficult for the 604 to evolve, and it was really struggling to. And I was told, right, can you go and revamp it? And the problem with the policy is it became this sort of wave effort. So, there'd be loads of effort thrown at it. And then, of course, people are busy, so then they switch to another job. And by that time, then the policy's out of date again. So then they throw lots of people at it. And really what we did is we just said, okay, let's stop here. Rather than just repeating this cycle, let's look at the fundamental question: why does it get out of date? What is the problem with it getting out of date? And the real problem was the content management system. It was a bunch of PDFs, and
right.
PDFs have their benefits. People can't come along and change them. They're very static. But we're dealing with IT here, and IT. The old saying is, if you're out of it for 7 years, you need to start again. And
right.
I think it probably could be a shorter timeline than that. So how could we possibly, with a bunch of PDFs and thousands, up to 2,000 pages, possibly keep a policy up to date with ICT? And so that's where we said, right, let's go out there and look at the content management systems that will enable us. And the biggest challenge was, if you change one part of it, what's the ripple effect? Because some could have tiny effects, some could have huge effects, but you couldn't understand that with PDFs. And so we down selected, and really we got to MediaWiki, and especially the Semantic Mediawiki on top of that, which allowed us to then, as I describe it, turn our words into data, which turned it into information, and that allowed us to present stakeholder views, so we could develop project plans and lists of things you needed to do at what stage and so on. So, and actually, you know, we developed a prototype. We presented how it could work, and we were fully supported. People recognise that the challenge of keeping this policy up to date, but the importance of keeping it up to date.
Yeah. Sorry. And so is that project fully complete? Transferring all the PDFs?
And well, yes. Well, the documents have been, the word's been transferred over. We're in a big change at the moment. We're moving to service design packages. I won't bore you with all the details. No, and I've actually said to everybody, it'll never be complete. That's the truth of it. It's an evolving policy, and it will always be slightly behind the drag curve. We'd love it to be ahead, to be looking to the future, but that's really not going to happen. It's the project teams who drive the requirements. They're the ones who are saying we need policy on cloud, we need policy on IDAM and these things, and they drive the priorities in terms of the policy and what needs to be developed, and that's absolutely great because it means it's being led by the forefront, by the innovation of ICT.
Yeah, you mentioned Semantic Mediawiki. I think you're also using the extension page forms. So how did you discover those, and were you using those from the very beginning?
Yeah, so we discovered them because NATO have a similar, it's not policy, they have a whole enterprise sort of architecture website built on Semantic Mediawiki. So so when I came to the team, a lot of people said, "Oh, have you seen NATO? What NATO are doing?" And when I went into that, while the way they were using it wasn't the way we wanted to use it, I absolutely saw the power in MediaWiki and Semantic Mediawiki. And what we wanted to do was make it as easy as possible for people to input information, but also into the right formats and so on. And if you ensure that, then that means you can search for that information and make it retrievable. I have to be honest, and I've said this to you before, that I really struggle to understand the power of Semantic Mediawiki when I first sort of went through the documentation. It's a difficult concept to initially understand, but when you get it, suddenly this light bulb, it's quite
Right.
it's quite funny when I explain it to people. I can see, you can see their eyes glazing over, and then suddenly they get it, and you just see their eyes light up, and you can see the light bulb moment, and suddenly they go, "Wait, you can do this," and you go, "Yep," and you can do that, and suddenly people get really, really passionate about it, and go, "Oh my God, that's incredible," and I think if people really understood the power of Semantic Mediawiki, it would just accelerate. I really do believe that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And that's interesting about NATO. I didn't realize you found about it. I guess indirectly via NATO. I'd actually hope to get someone from NATO on this podcast at some point.
Oh yeah. I'll give you a contact.
Oh, okay, cool. So how has the adoption of MediaWiki gone since you started using it in 2016? Has it spread out for other purposes?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, so we first of all presented this to government digital services and said, look, this is where we want to go with the policy, and they were fully supportive. They liked that we were trying out open source technology. They have a technology code of practice, and it absolutely aligned with that. And actually, funny enough, they've been passing on other policy owners to us, and so we've got at least two more policies now actually starting to use MediaWiki and Semantic Mediawiki. So what we're doing is we're now creating a group of, there's actually, there's I don't want a distinction, but the truth of it is, I work on the front end. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the business space. I'm looking at how the information is going to be used and exploited. And that drives me to understand, drives me to actually then develop what's the information we need to capture. I'll talk about that in a bit. I think that's quite critical in terms of how do you actually set up, how do you go about setting up your Semantic MediaWiki. But what I was saying there is so what we've created is really a community of MediaWiki now, and sort of the front end and the back end, because of course I don't have enough capacity to do that front end bit and also do the back end bit in terms of the extensions, keeping up to date, feeding and watering the server, those sort of things. So we've got those sort of excuse me. We've got those two distinct communities that we're bringing together. Obviously, we want both of them to be able to understand what each other's doing. But yeah, no, we're bringing them together. And that's really good because other people will come up with great ideas and we'll all employ them. But also, for example, we've already written a manual. What we haven't done is we haven't replicated any of the manuals out there that are already there. We've created manuals that are more bespoke to the way we run our wiki and so on.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do is make that a central manual, so all of the policy people will just maintain this single manual. So that combined effort is going to be really valuable.
Yeah. So are you basically running a wiki farm at this point?
Yes, you could call it that.
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah,
informal wiki farm.
Informal wiki farm. Yeah, there's no. It's all open, so there's no sort of splitting of permissions or anything like that. So they can all be viewed. I always think of wiki farms sometimes where you're trying to segregate the users, but yes, essentially we've got virtual machines all popping up, hosting policy.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. And are you basically doing MediaWiki full time at this point?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
since the beginning, or did you just sort of like gradually take over your job?
Took over my life, yeah. Yeah, so it's incredibly complex, and because the organisation's going through huge changes, it's all tying in very well, because actually what it's doing is it's prototyping the changes within the organisation and how we envisage systems and services being procured in the future. So we'll put something out there. Very rarely it's accepted, and the people say that's great. Most times, it gets spears and arrows thrown at it, which I always say is a great thing, because it means people care, and people, and now you've got more stakeholders, and they go, what about this? What about that? So that's what we're trying to do, and every time somebody says, "Can you do this?" and most of the requests that people have asked for has been trivial. We haven't had any challenges yet. Actually, we've got one. We're trying to make it so people don't lose their way within the wiki. Just an actual visual representation of where you are, if that makes sense.
Right.
So that's one of the challenges we have at the moment. We're trying to develop. But other than that, this is such a step beyond what users are used to in terms of a bunch of PDFs. It really, I'm hoping for the really difficult questions. Can you put this and this together and create this? And in the future, absolutely. That being said, one of my long-term proposals is why could we not look at the delivery of capability captured within a wiki using forms? And what I mean by that is, so the business requirement comes along, um, a wiki is people discuss it, it iterates, it goes back and forth, and then it starts going through. We look at the policy and the application of that policy, and again that starts adding up, and then this capability, the description of this capability starts to develop on the wiki. That would be that's aside from the policy, but to me could be another use of how MediaWiki and Semantic Mediawiki could be used in the future, because then you have this historic record of how something's developed, why decisions were made, and what they were based on. But also, even
Right.
more importantly, you could have a capability that could have all of its functionality understood in one place. What system what operating system it sits on, what interactions it has with other systems, all those different things, which would make configuration management, change management, all those sort of things a lot easier and a lot very quick to far more easier to understand the impact of change within the organization. Or a simple example, you need to upgrade your Java. So, how can we search across all our systems and make sure that we've captured every single one? It's a challenge that
Yeah.
most industry is struggling with at the moment.
Yeah, that's interesting. So MediaWiki could become essentially a part of the quote unquote DevOps system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that is quite interesting. Yeah, I'm not aware of that being done, but there's no reason why it couldn't or shouldn't.
Yeah, definitely no reason why it shouldn't.
You've I saw you give a talk at the Enterprise MediaWiki conference in Houston, where you mentioned one of the strengths of MediaWiki being that it helps a lot with agile development, i.e., rapid prototyping and that sort of thing, which I totally agree with. But when you talk about agile development, do you mean capital A agile? Like, do you guys use Scrum and that whole methodology?
Yes and no. It's not appropriate for all projects, as Agile says straight away in most of the documentation. So um, the way I liken it to is, if you take your 7-layer ISO model, um, if you're just developing an application on that, on the top of the stack, I think Agile is absolutely perfect for it. If you're developing a full stack development, I don't think Agile is particularly appropriate. Now, it could be, you could break down each element and so on. So what we're trying what we're trying to understand, so what we're trying to do is, we still have, so if a tank, for example, comes along with an IT system, it has an IT system,
Right.
that tank is not going to be developed in an agile way. It can't be. It's a slow moving beast, pardon the pun. But it's so, and the IT system again is going to be limited by the space within the tank and all those sort of factors. So it's going to probably follow less of an agile process along there. There's others where we've got, virtualization, we've got a hosting environment, we want to host an app, we want to iterate this app and so on. That's absolutely appropriate for agile. And what's one of the challenges within the policy is, how do we map these? What we try to do is keep a completely generic a project delivery method. So have a generic project delivery method across the policy, so it could be mapped to whatever the flavor of the month is. It was Prince 2, you might remember a while back. We've had CADMID, we've had Agile. And there may, Agile may be thrown out the window, and something new comes along. So we didn't want to tie ourselves down to any specific um, project delivery methodology, but we
Right.
wanted to make sure that we could cater for all of them. Um, I'm a great believer in Agile. I'm a great believer in prototyping. Nobody gets it right first time. So
Yeah.
let's not pretend, let's not have that sort of hubris to think we can develop something perfect straight away. Put it out there, see what, and that's very much, I'm very much somebody who doesn't care if doesn't care what's obviously I want to put something decent out there, but I don't care if it's not 100%, because you spend too long on that last 20%, where actually the users are far more likely to give you a better steer than you can ever think of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree, and I do think MediaWiki, setting up media data structures in MediaWiki is great for that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, and I've, a number of times I've created, queries that have produced, dragged information from here, there, and everywhere, and they go, do you know what would be useful is that and that as well, and literally you do it there in front of them, and straight
right.
away they're converted. They're converted, you know.
Yeah. Right. Right. No, they're expecting you to say, well, yeah,
Walk.
I'll see you in a few weeks, and we'll look at what
Yeah.
we have. So, um, moving, switching topics a little bit. I know you've thought a lot about the marketing of MediaWiki and how to spread the word about it. At that same EMWCon talk, you mentioned the book Crossing the Chasm, which I thought was very interesting because it's been very influential to me in terms of thinking about marketing software. For those who don't know about it, that's a book by Geoffrey Moore that was first published in 1991 and has gone through a few revisions. I think my copy is from 1999. A lot of people consider it the Bible of software marketing. Could you explain what you see as some of the key ideas of that book?
Um, I think mine's a bit more. I think it's a bit more fundamental. It's I think to me, business need um, drives the software requirements, and what you know. I've been to two EMW conferences now, and it blows me away the work that people are doing, the technical challenges that people are addressing. But what I think is missing is just explaining to business, looking at business problems and creating prototypes and saying, look, this is how you could use it. Give us a
Right.
problem, let's throw us a problem. A few people get around, go, well, here you go, this is how you solve it. And I think um, we talked about creating this enterprise, this environment of a sort of fake business, and a few of us are planning to develop that, but of course we get bogged down with real life and work. Um, I think until we are able to articulate this to the business community, it will just be we absolutely get it, and when people get it, and when the business community gets it, it'll be an absolute no-brainer. This is free, bespoke, customizable software that can literally, that can um, database your information, or turn all of turn your text into machine readable information that can be extracted, and you can get value out of that. I mean, but that sort of strategy of getting businesses on board, or how you present this to business, I don't think's been addressed. And so when I talked about the chasm, that there's this golden sort of number of I think it's 13, the threshold of 14% that you want to sort of jump over. So you're moving from the innovators.
Right.
There's a very nice sort of bell-shaped curve where you're moving across. The first of all, the innovators grab a new technology, then the early adopters, and then the early majority. And if you get past the early adopters, that's about the 14%. Now, of course, this is no society behaves perfectly like a bell-shaped curve, but you know, if you get over that 14%, the early majority, will grab onto this, and then usually something goes exponential, something really takes off. You won't necessarily get everybody, but so it is how do you jump over that chasm? What do you do? Well,
Yeah.
the people who are going to drive this are not us. I wouldn't put myself in an innovator. I'd call myself an early adopter. I'd call yourself and the rest of uh, the brainiacs at the conference, the innovators of this. But what we're not
Well,
doing is
thanks.
we're
Although,
not.
actually, just to jump in, I mean, as far as adopting new software, I'm definitely in the lagging
Oh,
group.
you're a
Um,
laggard, are you? Uh,
so yeah, no, I'm actually I think in the same boat as you are, other than of course this MediaWiki thing.
yeah. So the how do you jump over that 14%? And but first of all, why do you want to jump over that 14%? Well, why? Because you get a larger community, you get more people interested, you get more people who start contributing to the community. It's an absolute win-win. Um, so there's clearly a benefit to getting more people on board. So how do you do it? And really by targeting business and looking at business needs, business specific user needs, and saying, you know, you want to do this? Well, this is very simple. So as you might at the talk, we were discussing almost apps for Semantic MediaWiki where you could develop, whether it be your contacts list, or whether it be your a project list, all these sort of things that could be developed, that could, you break down the properties, you break down the elements of this, and you explain clearly how you create it. And so businesses can almost take away those instructions and build it on their server for their and then start demonstrating these prototypes to the CEO and saying, look, this is available, this is free, all it's going to cost is our intellectual time, and the limit is our imagination.
Yeah. Um, there's a really interesting idea in crossing the chasm, tied in with that idea of getting over crossing the chasm, I guess, getting over the hump of the initial early innovators, early adopters, which is the idea of establishing a beachhead, which is a little niche market that you control as much as possible of. This is just a random side note, but I think it's interesting that the business world has embraced a kind of military mentality. That idea of the beachhead, and of course, people quote The Art of War and so forth. And now it seems like the military is taking more of an inspiration from the corporate world. So this is interesting because you and the military are talking about Crossing the Chasm, which is a business book that in turn takes inspiration from D-Day in World War II and other military tactics. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point. It's kind of the circle, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
we became the innovators, then industry became the innovators. It just depends. It depends. I think it's time, history, all those sort of things. I
Yeah.
think both can learn off each other, and both shouldn't be so arrogant to think they know best. I think that's the sort of obvious thing from this. Go out there and see how people are solving. We all have the same problems.
Sure.
I sometimes, I think, as everybody does, they get frustrated, and you go, you know, why haven't we cracked this problem? And you go out to industry, and you find they're in the same boat. There are problems out there that many are struggling with. I mean, if you saw everybody, scrambling around with GDPR recently, that's a great example. People lost control of what they were doing. And there was a good reset button, I thought. So
So that was in some ways reminiscent of like a military exercise where you're just trying to establish some sense of order.
yeah, absolutely. We all know. I mean, if GDPR, we've sidetracked a bit, but GDPR is asking questions that everybody should know. What are you doing with your data?
Right.
Where's it going? You know, but I know plenty of industries out there who haven't got a clue. And why? Because it costs money to find out. And this was the only motivating factor that made them reassess, or force them into this position where they went, oh, maybe we should actually work this out. So yeah,
Yeah.
I thought, because I think it would have never happened otherwise.
Sure. Yeah, and if you mentioned GDPR, I should give a little plug to an earlier episode, an interview I had with Bernhard Krabina, who has a MediaWiki-based solution for GDPR stuff, I think called Data Cockpit. So anyway,
Yeah,
if anyone's
absolutely, and,
interested,
and that's a great example of how this can be demonstrated or prototyped to industry.
yeah. So I wanted to ask one other thing related to Crossing the Chasm and MediaWiki, which is there's a very interesting idea in there tied into that whole establish a beachhead idea, which is it doesn't necessarily matter how many things your software can do or how many people it can help, because if you start listing off all the things it can do, people will sort of subconsciously rebel against that. And the idea is you should instead be as minimalistic as possible and say, this small group of people should adopt it. And the reason that it should adopt it is that it does all the same things as whatever the main competing software is, but it does this one thing better. So the idea is to keep the pitch as minimal as possible, even if that means vastly underselling your software. I think that's very applicable for MediaWiki, especially for people trying to spread the use of so-called enterprise MediaWiki, which involves extensions we've talked about like Semantic Mediawiki, or page forms, or cargo, where it can really be used to do a whole lot of different things. But I fear that sort of generality can really work against us. Yeah, I mean, does that ring true for you in any way, that it's sort of it's just too much for people to really grasp?
I couldn't agree more. Really what you want to do is you want to focus on a single area that you think would, a quick win, and that's, we could debate, where that could be. There's lots of examples, but you're right. You spread yourself too thin. I saw a few talks where MediaWiki or some people were comparing it to other content management systems, and I don't think that needs to be done. I think what's worth doing is saying, why is, let's say, Reddit popular, for example, because you can have your upvote, downvote sort of thing, you know, and it actually is a really good way of somebody asks a question and straight away the most popular answer pops to the top sort of thing, you know. So that could be replicated quite easily, you know, and so um,
Yeah.
looking at the success of others and going, that could be done quite easily, you know, if there was a use case for that. But what hasn't been determined is what are the big use cases out there for, you know, and what could MediaWiki with Semantic Mediawiki, you know, address? What could it easily solve um, for the community?
Right.
Personally, I've been thinking about this. I think this cybersecurity. I think mapping it against NIST, which is the US cybersecurity framework, and the ISO 27001 would be a really powerful. Everybody needs to do it. Everybody needs to understand their cybersecurity maturity. You know, to have a software that actually enables you to understand the attack vectors, what your maturity is, where you need to. You're never going to, I come from a cybersecurity background. You're never going to address everything. You know, it's impossible. You know, but it's like saying, you know, my house is totally secure. It's not. You know, somebody will break in if they're absolutely determined to, but you can make it as unpleasant as you possibly can. You know, you can put, you know, hungry guard dogs on the outside and barbed wire and so on. And exactly the same for cybersecurity. You know, you want to make sure any low-hanging fruit has been removed, so it becomes a real challenge to actually break through the system and actually get through. And actually, I think MediaWiki and Semantic MediaWiki, working through that NIST framework, allowing people to audit their own company, their IT systems, and actually then present a sort of, you know, red, green, and amber, understand it to the CEO, saying like, these are your greatest risks, and those are the financial implications or the reputational damage if they're not addressed. You know, that's, to me, that every company needs that. That's I think as a community we could develop that, and you know, it would be pretty powerful to say the least. But that's just my opinion. I think there's plenty of other people out there who will have other opinions in terms of how we could sell this as a capability
Well,
to business.
yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the problem. Everyone, everyone has a different
Yeah,
idea of what the niche is, I guess. But
yeah, absolutely.
so
And
wait,
probably
so what was that
sorry, go on.
NIST? I don't think I'd heard of that.
NIST.
That's
NIST, yeah. So
that's NIST.
yes, that's right. So it's the National Institute for Standards and Technology, and they have a cybersecurity framework.
And that's required in every country, or
No, not at all.
everyone who deals
It's
with something.
it's basically suggesting how you would go about looking at cybersecurity within your organization. So the first thing you do is an audit. You identify, you know, what are the attack vectors, who are the actors. So, you know, the people who want to attack you, whether it be rival companies or whether it be, you know, hackers or people who extortionists, you know, and then you scale the risk in terms of what are they likely to do, you know, what's the likelihood of them wanting to attack you, and so on, and then it just starts to build up a picture in terms
Yeah.
of what you need to think about and what you need to address. And it's basically based on the ISO 27001. They're not they tie in quite well.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. MediaWiki, I guess, is a cybersecurity documentation system.
Yeah, or documentation or auditing system.
Oh, auditing. Yeah, yeah, that's a better term. Um, so you mentioned at the beginning that you are actually leaving the Ministry of Defense pretty soon. I'm glad I caught you before you left. What's the next step for you personally? Do you know yet?
No, I don't. No, I'm very much looking forward to it. I've had an absolutely fantastic time in the Air Force. Sad to leave, but family commitments sometimes take precedence, and my wife's had had it hard enough, moving around the country and so on. So it's time to settle down. Um, so moving to Dublin, and yeah, basically we'll be looking out for a job. So please contact me if you've got something interesting to offer.
Okay, very good. We'll have a link to some sort of maybe your LinkedIn page or something
That'd be
there
great.
on
Thank
the
you.
on the
Thank you. Yeah,
podcast
yeah,
site.
yeah. Sell me.
Very good. And
Yeah, well, there was one other topic. I don't
oh,
know.
okay. Yeah, shoot.
I mentioned it earlier, but I talked about how you actually go about developing, and I talk about this a bit in my talk, which is on YouTube. But the I also should say I've done I've done a few tutorial videos on YouTube as well. So I'm just trying to, because it took me a while to understand MediaWiki. I've tried to explain them in my sort of layman basic terms. So please, people, go out and see them and tell me what you think, and tell me uh, what other topics we can start to add to that. Um, I think one of the key
Cool.
things is trying to work out, when you're starting off with MediaWiki and Semantic Mediawiki and the forms and the page forms, is how do you develop them? You know, and I think the key thing is understanding what as we call them in the operator wants to see. What's the information that they need to see? You know, and so if you don't engage with the operation community and understand their business, that's what I've really enjoyed about this. It's also business analysis. So it's going to the operation community saying, right, what do you need to make your business easier? And you go, well, I need to see this, I need to understand that, you go, great, because that now gives you your database schema, and that says, right, in order for them to see that, we need to gather this information, and that then starts building your forms. And I think a lot of times people try and start at the wrong end, where they try and information manage everything without actually really understanding what the output is. What's the end game? What are you trying to achieve?
Yeah. So what are some good strategies as far as figuring out the data structure and turning a schema into something on the wiki?
I think don't aim for perfection.
Yeah.
Just put it together. You know, if you spent more than an hour on it, I think you've spent too long on it. You know, go out. Build it very, very quickly. Present it to the person. The user, and they'll quickly tell you if you're heading in the right direction or if you're not. And I think it's that really a book I'm a huge fan of that I recently read. It's called Black Box Thinking, and it's all about prototype. It's all about lots of things. It's a fantastic book, and I'd recommend it to everybody. But it talks about people like James Dyson, so you might know from the Hoover. He
Right.
didn't just come up. He just didn't just come up with this bagless Hoover after one. It took thousands of iterations, thousands of things that he had to sort of change. And there's all these examples of. I thought one of the best stories there was this teacher, the ceramics teacher, split the class into two. He said one half would be marked on the number of pots they produced, and the other would be marked on the quality of the pots they produced. And by the end of the term, the best quality was also by those who produced the most.
Ah,
So through, despite that they didn't really care about the quality, but through iteration and through creating lots, they actually started to create the best quality pots anyway. And I think that's exactly the same here, that we, I can't remember the phrase is. It'll come to me and say, perfection is the
the enemy of the good or something.
Sorry, yes. I mean, I say good is good enough.
Yeah.
It just get it out there, see what people say, and let it come back. People drive for that perfection too much. Um,
Yeah.
I think life's too short for that. There's so much going on, and there's so many things that that Semantic Media Wiki can do for you, that you just want to, keep developing it for the operator as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and that's relevant to a lot of things in IT and maybe a lot of things in life also.
Yeah, I think so.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about or mention?
No, I don't think so.
Very good. Well, Ben, it's been a very interesting talk, and thanks for coming on the show.
No, thank you very much.
That concludes another episode of Between the Brackets. I want to again thank my guest, Ben Fletcher of the Ministry of Defense. See you next time.